The security perimeter breach alarm screamed through Lieutenant Sarah Chen's tactical helmet at 0347 hours, ripping her from a restless sleep in the forward observation post. She rolled from her cot with practiced efficiency, weapon already in hand, scanning the holographic display that materialized before her eyes. Something small had crossed the magnetic fence. Too small for the predators they'd cataloged, too erratic for the local herbivores. The jungle canopy blocked satellite imaging, leaving only thermal signatures that flickered like dying embers through dense vegetation. Her team of 4 moved into formation without words, their powered armor humming softly as hydraulics compensated for the uneven terrain. They'd been on this unnamed moon for 6 weeks, establishing humanity's first research outpost in the Kelos system, and every night brought new discoveries, most of them dangerous. The thermal signature had stopped moving 300 meters from their perimeter, near the old growth where the trees grew thick enough to block out both moons. Sarah signaled her team to spread wide, approaching from multiple angles, her finger resting beside the trigger guard of her pulse rifle. The jungle breathed around them, alive with sounds that still felt wrong to human ears. Clicks and whistles and something like distant singing that rose and fell with no pattern she could recognize. Through her night vision she sighed. A small figure crouched in the hollow of a massive root system, perfectly still except for the rapid rise and fall of breathing. A child. Sarah's breath caught. The girl couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 in human years, her skin a pale lavender that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness, marked with intricate patterns that might have been natural or decorative. Sarah couldn't tell. She wore nothing, her small frame covered only by mud and what looked like deliberately applied plant matter, as if she'd been trying to camouflage herself. Large eyes, too large for her face, reflected the starlight like a nocturnal animal's. Those eyes locked onto Sarah's, and the child went absolutely rigid. Sarah lowered her weapon slowly, raising her other hand, palm out, in what she hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The girl's lips pulled back, revealing small, sharp teeth, and a sound emerged from her throat that made Sarah's skin prickle. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper, something desperate and wild. "It's okay," Sarah whispered, knowing the translator clipped to her collar wouldn't help with a language it had never heard. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The girl's head tilted, bird-like, processing. Then her eyes shifted past Sarah to where Corporal Martinez had moved into position, and the child bolted. She was fast, impossibly fast for something so small, but Sarah's armor-enhanced reflexes let her close the distance. She caught the girl around the waist, gentle but firm, and immediately regretted it as tiny claws raked across her forearm where the armor joints exposed a thin layer of protective fabric. The girl thrashed with surprising strength, that keening sound growing louder, more frantic. Sarah held on, absorbing the blows, murmuring continuously in a low, calm voice that probably meant nothing but might convey tone. "Easy, easy, you're safe. You're safe now." The girl's struggles weakened, not from exhaustion but from something else, a kind of resigned collapse that broke Sarah's heart. The child went limp in her arms, still trembling, eyes squeezed shut as if waiting for a killing blow that wouldn't come. They brought her back to the medical bay, where Dr. Okonkwo stood ready with scanners and analysis equipment that hummed to life as they entered. The girl didn't fight anymore, but she didn't relax either, every muscle taut beneath skin that felt too cool to Sarah's touch. "She's malnourished," Okonkwo reported, studying the holographic readouts that rotated slowly in the air. "Dehydrated. Multiple old injuries, some recent... These scars," she gestured to faint lines across the girl's back and shoulders. "They're not from the jungle." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Someone did this to her? Okonkwo's expression went carefully neutral, the look she wore when delivering bad news. Or she did it to herself, trying to escape from someone. Hard to say, but she's been living rough out there for weeks, maybe months. Alone. The girl's eyes tracked every movement in the room, never settling, always calculating. When Okonkwo reached for her with a medical scanner, the child flinched so violently she nearly fell from the examination table. Sarah stepped forward instinctively, placing herself between the doctor and the girl, and something changed in those 2 large eyes. A flicker of recognition, perhaps. Or the beginning of trust. "Let me," Sarah said quietly. She took the scanner from Okonkwo's hands and held it where the girl could see it, turning it slowly, pressing it against her own arm to demonstrate. The device beeped softly, projecting Sarah's vital signs in soft blue light. The girl watched transfixed. Sarah moved the scanner closer, inch by inch, until it hovered near the child's shoulder. The girl's breathing quickened, but she didn't pull away. The scanner hummed, collecting data, and the girl's eyes widened as her own vital signs appeared in the air. Heart rate elevated, blood chemistry off in ways that suggested chronic stress and inadequate nutrition, but alive, functioning, resilient. A small sound escaped the girl's throat, different from before. Almost curious. Sarah smiled, keeping her movements slow and predictable. See? Just checking to make sure you're okay? That's all. The girl's hand rose tentatively, fingers outstretched toward the holographic display of her own heartbeat. She touched it and gasped when her hand passed through the light, leaving ripples in the projection. For the first time, something other than fear crossed her face. Wonder, brief and fragile as morning mist. The communication came through at dawn, and it changed everything. Commander Park's voice crackled over the secure channel, tight with tension Sarah had never heard from her before. Chen, we have a situation. Long-range sensors just picked up a vessel entering orbit. Configuration matches the Velan Sovereignty. They're hailing us. Sarah's blood went cold. The Velan Sovereignty, an empire spanning 17 systems, known for their rigid caste structure and absolute rule. First contact protocols suggested careful diplomacy, measured responses, zero provocations. They're demanding we return something that belongs to them, Park continued. Specifically a juvenile female who fled a royal vessel 3 months ago. Chen is the child you found. Sarah looked through the observation window into the medical bay where the girl had finally fallen asleep on the examination table, one small hand clutching the edge of Sarah's jacket that she'd left behind as a blanket. She's Velan, Sarah confirmed, her voice flat. And they want her back. Park's pause lasted 3 seconds too long. The ship in orbit is a royal cruiser. The transmission came from Queen Nalith herself. She's not asking, Lieutenant. She's informing us that her daughter will be returned within 12 hours, or they will consider it an act of war against the sovereignty. The word sat in Sarah's chest like a stone. The small, scarred, terrified creature who'd been living like an animal in the jungle. She was royalty. The medical bay door hissed open, and Dr. Ravenel Okonkwo emerged, her face grim. I finished the detailed scans. Sarah, those marks on her back, they're ritual scarification. Part of Velan coming-of-age ceremonies that begin at age 6. The neural scans show trauma patterns consistent with repeated psychological conditioning. Whatever she ran from, it wasn't a happy palace. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. We can't send her back. Okonkwo's expression softened with something like pity. We might not have a choice. That cruiser has enough firepower to glass this entire installation from orbit. We have 43 personnel here, Sarah. 43 lives weighed against one child who isn't even human. The words were logical, practical, the kind of calculation that kept people alive in hostile territory. Sarah hated them anyway. What kind of people would we be if we made that trade? She asked quietly. Okonkwo had no answer. The Queen arrived in a shuttle that descended through the morning mist like a falling star, flanked by an honor guard in ceremonial armor that looked beautiful and deadly in equal measure. Sarah stood at attention in the landing area, her dress uniform feeling constrictive after weeks in tactical gear, watching as the shuttle's ramp extended with mechanical precision. Queen Nalith emerged first, and Sarah understood immediately why an entire empire bowed before her. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her bearing absolutely regal, skin the deep purple of twilight sky and marked with patterns far more intricate than her daughter's. She wore robes that seemed to shift colors in the light, and a crown of what looked like living crystal that pulsed with bioluminescent rhythms. Her eyes, the same oversized proportion as the child's, swept across the human installation with an expression Sarah couldn't read. Commander Park stepped forward, executing the formal bow that their xenocultural briefings had suggested was appropriate. Your Majesty, we welcome you to... Naelth raised one long-fingered hand, and Park's words died. I did not come for pleasantries. I came for my daughter. You will produce her immediately. Sarah felt every eye turn toward her. She'd been designated as the girl's primary contact, the one who'd found her, the one the child seemed least terrified of. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on her shoulders as she stepped forward. Your Majesty, the child is currently resting in our medical facility. She was severely malnourished and dehydrated when we found her. Our doctors have been... Nalith's eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that felt physical. You speak of her condition as if I am not aware, as if I did not know every moment my daughter spent in that jungle, suffering, alone, because she was too stubborn to accept her destiny. The Queen's voice carried harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce, adding layers of meaning Sarah felt more than understood. Anger, yes, but beneath it something else. Fear, loss, She ran from you, Sarah said, the words emerging before she could stop them. Around her, she felt the humans tense, horrified at the breach of protocol. But Nolith didn't strike her down. Instead, the queen went very still. Yes, she said finally, she did. And in doing so, she disgraced her bloodline, abandoned her duties, and brought shame upon the sovereignty. The punishment for such actions is severe. But she is young, and the conditioning can be reapplied. She will learn. Sarah's stomach turned. Conditioning. All royal children undergo preparation for their responsibilities. It is tradition stretching back 10,000 years. My daughter is weak, too easily moved by emotion, too concerned with the suffering of lesser castes. These flaws must be corrected before she can rule. The pieces clicked into place in Sarah's mind. The scars, the trauma patterns, the way the girl had collapsed into terrified submission when caught. Not because she expected death, but because she expected to be sent back to something worse. She's a child, Sarah said, aware she was crossing lines that could end her career or start a war. She's 7 years old. What you're describing is torture. The Queen's eyes flashed with something dangerous. You presume to judge our ways with your limited human understanding? We were building empires when your species was learning to make fire. You know nothing of what is required to rule, to bear the weight of billions of lives across multiple worlds. My daughter must be hard, must be perfect, must be willing to sacrifice anything for the sovereignty, including her own comfort. Behind Nalith, her honor guard shifted almost imperceptibly, hands moving toward weapons. Commander Park's voice came through Sarah's earpiece, barely a whisper. "Stand down, Lieutenant." That's an order. But Sarah couldn't. Not when she thought of that small hand clutching her jacket, that moment of wonder when the girl had seen her own heartbeat projected in light. "Your Majesty," she said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. "Permission to speak freely." Nalith studied her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, she gestured agreement. "I am curious what a human soldier believes she can say that would matter to me." "Speak." Sarah took a breath. "I grew up in the Seoul District in the aftermath of the Water Wars. My mother was a sergeant in the relief forces. She saw things, did things that broke something inside her. When I was young, she tried to make me hard. Tried to train the emotion out of me, because she thought that's what I'd need to survive. She thought she was preparing me for the world." Nalith's expression remained unreadable, but she didn't interrupt. "It took me years to understand that what she was really doing was passing on her own trauma," Sarah continued. "She was taking her pain and making it mine, thinking it would protect me, but all it did was damage us both. It wasn't until she stopped, until she let herself be vulnerable again, let me be vulnerable, that we could actually heal." The Queen's silence stretched out, heavy with unspoken things. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its imperious edge. "You compare a mother's grief to the requirements of empire?" Sarah shook her head. "I'm saying that strength doesn't come from cutting away everything that makes us feel. Real strength is carrying those feelings and choosing what to do with them. Your daughter ran into a hostile jungle and survived for 3 months alone. That's not weakness, Your Majesty. That's incredible strength. She just doesn't want to use it the way you demand." The silence that followed felt like standing on the edge of a precipice. Then Nalith did something Sarah never expected. The Queen's shoulders sagged, just slightly, the perfect royal posture cracking almost imperceptibly. "Take me to her," Nalith said quietly. "I would see my daughter." They walked through the installation in procession, the Queen and her guards, Commander Park and her security team, Sarah leading them all toward the medical bay where the girl still slept. With each step, Sarah felt the weight of what she'd done settling onto her shoulders. She'd challenged a monarch to her face, potentially doomed her entire outpost. And for what? A child who wasn't even human, who belonged to a culture she barely understood. But when she thought of that small, trembling body in her arms, the way the girl had finally relaxed when shown simple kindness, Sarah knew she'd make the same choice again. Okonkwo met them at the medical bay entrance, her face professionally neutral as she briefed the Queen on the girl's condition. Nalith listened without comment, her eyes fixed on the observation window where her daughter lay sleeping. The girl had curled into a tight ball, Sarah's jacket pulled up to her chin, her face finally peaceful in unconsciousness. Something flickered across the Queen's face, so quick Sarah almost missed it, before the regal mask returned. "Leave us," Nalith commanded. Her guards began to protest, but she silenced them with a look. "All of you. I will speak with my daughter alone." Commander Park started to object. Security protocols, diplomatic observers, a dozen good reasons why leaving an alien monarch alone was a terrible idea. But Sarah caught her eye and shook her head minutely. Some instinct told her this was important, that whatever happened next needed to happen without witnesses. Park's jaw tightened, but she nodded. They withdrew to the observation room next door, where monitors would let them see but not hear what transpired. Naelth entered the medical bay with movements so controlled they barely disturbed the air. She approached the examination table slowly, each step measured, until she stood looking down at her sleeping daughter. For a long moment, she simply watched the rise and fall of the girl's breathing. Then, with infinite care, she reached out and touched her daughter's face. The girl's eyes snapped open, immediately going wide with terror as she recognized her mother. She tried to scramble backward, nearly falling from the table, that keening sound starting in her throat again. But Naelith didn't grab her, didn't command silence, didn't do any of the things Sarah expected. Instead, the queen sank down slowly until she was kneeling. A queen, kneeling, bringing herself to her daughter's eye level. Selenara, Naelith said, and even through the observation window Sarah could hear the name carried on harmonics that spoke of grief and love and desperate hope. My daughter, my star child, I am here. The girl, Selenara, shook her head frantically, pressing herself against the far edge of the table. Words spilled from her in a language Sarah's translator could only partially parse, but the meaning was clear enough. Please. No, not again. I can't, please. Naelith's hands trembled. The first uncontrolled movement Sarah had seen from her. I know, the queen said softly. I know what the conditioning did to you. I know how it hurt. I told myself it was necessary, that all royal children endured it, that it would make you strong enough to bear the crown. But Selenara, you were already strong. So strong that you survived alone in a hostile world, rather than endure one more day of what I forced upon you. Tears were flowing down the girl's face now, silent and silver in the medical bay's lights. I was wrong, Naelith continued, and through the observation window Sarah saw her own team members exchange shocked looks. Queens of the Velen sovereignty did not admit error. It was unthinkable, impossible, a violation of everything their culture held sacred. I was so consumed by the weight of empire, by the expectations of our ancestors, by the fear of appearing weak, I forgot to simply be your mother. Naelith reached into her robes and withdrew something small, something that glowed with soft blue light. A toy, Sarah realized. Some kind of Valan toy, worn from handling, one corner carefully repaired. Do you remember this? Naelith asked. You were 4 years old when you lost it in the palace gardens. You cried for 3 days. I told you crying was beneath a princess, that you needed to learn control. But you couldn't stop, and finally I searched the gardens myself in the middle of the night and found it wedged in a fountain drain. I repaired it in secret and left it on your bed. I never told you it was me because I thought admitting to such sentimentality would undermine my authority. She set the toy on the table between them. I have carried it with me every day since you disappeared, Selenara. Every single day, hoping I would have the chance to give it back to you, hoping you were alive to receive it. Selenara's small hand crept forward, trembling, touching the toy with fingertips that remembered. A sound emerged from her throat, broken and small. Mama? Naelith's composure finally shattered. She pulled her daughter into her arms, and the queen who ruled 17 systems wept openly as she held the child she'd nearly destroyed in the name of preparing her to rule. They rocked together, Naelith murmuring things in her own language that Sarah's translator couldn't fully capture, apologies, promises, endearments that had been locked away behind royal protocol for too long. Through the observation window, Sarah felt her own eyes burning. Commander Park's hand found her shoulder, squeezing once in acknowledgement, or forgiveness, or simple shared humanity. What happened in there? Martinez whispered, staring at the monitors in disbelief. Did we just watch a queen have a breakthrough? Dr. Okonkwo smiled, soft and sad. We watched a mother. Remember, she was a mother first. When Naelith finally emerged from the medical bay an hour later, she looked different. The perfect mask had been set aside, revealing someone older and more vulnerable, but somehow stronger for that vulnerability. Selenara walked beside her, not pulled or dragged, but holding her mother's hand voluntarily, the toy clutched against her chest with the other. Commander Park, Naelith said, her voice still carrying authority, but tempered now with something else. I owe your Lieutenant Chen a debt that cannot be easily repaid. She showed my daughter kindness when she expected none. She challenged me when I needed challenging. These are not small things. Park inclined her head carefully. The lieutenant acted according to her conscience, Your Majesty. Nalith's eyes found Sarah's across the room. Your conscience is well calibrated, young warrior. You saw what I had blinded myself to, that in trying to make my daughter strong enough for a crown, I was breaking what made her worthy of wearing one. She paused, then continued with visible effort at the admission. The sovereignty's ways are old, and change comes slowly to us. But change must come. I cannot promise my daughter will never face hardship or that her path will be easy, but I can promise that I will stand beside her through it, as a mother should. And I will work to ensure that other royal children are not subjected to conditioning that damages them in the name of tradition. Selenara tugged on her mother's hand, speaking rapidly in their own language. Nalith listened, then smiled, a real smile that transformed her face entirely. My daughter wishes to thank you herself, she said to Sarah. She says you were kind when you didn't have to be, gentle when you could have been harsh, patient when she gave you no reason to be. She says the jungle taught her to survive, but you taught her that not all hands that reach for you mean harm. Sarah knelt down, bringing herself to Selenara's level the way Naleth had. You're very brave, she said simply. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Selenara studied her for a moment with those two large eyes, then stepped forward and wrapped small arms around Sarah's neck in a brief, fierce hug. When she pulled back, she pressed the worn toy into Sarah's hands. Sarah tried to return it, but Selenara shook her head firmly, speaking words the translator finally rendered, You keep it safe, for when I visit again. Nalith's expression softened impossibly further. Yes, when we visit again. She looked to Commander Park. If your people are amenable, I would like to establish formal, diplomatic relations between the sovereignty and humanity. I believe we have much to learn from each other, and Selenara has expressed interest in learning more about the humans who showed her kindness. I think perhaps that's an education worth pursuing. Park's professional demeanor cracked into a genuine smile. I think that can be arranged, Your Majesty. They departed with the same ceremony they'd arrived with, but something fundamental had shifted. As the royal shuttle lifted off, climbing toward the cruiser in orbit, Sarah stood holding a child's toy and watching the sky. Commander Park joined her, silent for a moment. You took one hell of a risk, Lieutenant, she said finally. Yes, ma'am. It could have gone very, very badly. Yes, ma'am. Park was quiet for another beat. Good call, anyway. Sarah smiled, turning the toy over in her hands. It was delicate and strange, unmistakably alien, but the wear marks from small fingers were universal. The scuff on one corner where Nalith had repaired it spoke to a love that transcended species and culture. Commander, can I ask you something? Sarah said. What made you let me bring the Queen in alone? Every protocol said we should have had observers, recorders, a security presence. Park's expression went distant. I have a daughter, 7 years old, back on Earth, and if she ever ran away from me, if she was so desperate to escape that she'd rather risk death in a jungle than stay with me, I'd want someone to care enough to help me understand why. She looked at Sarah directly. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't following protocol. It's trusting that kindness might accomplish what force never could. They stood together in companionable silence, watching as the royal cruiser began its departure sequence. The vessel was beautiful in a way human ships weren't, all flowing lines and elegant curves, power contained within artistry. Before it jumped to faster than light, a final transmission came through to the installation. Nalith's voice, private channel, directed to Sarah alone. You asked me what kind of people humanity would be if they chose one child's welfare over their own safety. You showed me the answer through your actions, Lieutenant Chen. You would be the kind of people the galaxy desperately needs. The transmission ended, the cruiser vanished in a flash of displaced light, and Sarah stood in the morning sun of an alien moon, holding a child's toy and thinking about the strange ways the universe sometimes worked. She'd come to this installation to explore unknown worlds, to push back the boundaries of human knowledge, to plant humanity's flag in new territory. She'd found something better, a reminder that across all the vast distances of space, across all the differences of culture and biology and history, some things remained constant. Fear, love, the desperate need to protect children, the courage it took to admit being wrong. The healing power of simple kindness. Martinez approached with the day's duty roster, took one look at Sarah's face, and grinned. You look like you've had an enlightening morning, Lieutenant. Sarah laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. I think maybe we all did, Corporal. She tucked the toy carefully into her pocket, where it rested against her heart like a promise or a hope. The jungle around them was waking fully now, Strange birds calling to stranger birds, the day cycle of an alien world beginning its rhythms. But it felt less alien than it had yesterday. Less hostile. Just another place where people, human or otherwise, were doing their best to live, to love, to raise their children towards something better than they'd known. Later, in her report to Earth Command, Sarah would struggle to find the right words for what had happened. How did you quantify a queen's tears? How did you measure the weight of a child's trust freely given? How did you explain to bureaucrats light years away that first contact wasn't always about treaties and trade agreements, but sometimes about seeing another being's pain and choosing to care? In the end, she wrote simply, contact established with Volan sovereignty. Relations positive. Recommend continued diplomatic engagement. Human values of compassion and individual dignity appear to resonate across species boundaries. Will file detailed report forthcoming. It was inadequate. But some truths were too big for official language, too profound for clinical documentation. Some truths lived in the space between a mother and daughter reconciling, in the weight of a child's toy passed between strangers who became something like friends, in the acknowledgement that strength came not from hardness but from the courage to remain soft in a universe that demanded otherwise. Sarah kept the toy for 3 years, carrying it through promotions and deployments, through humanity's expanding presence in the Kalos system and beyond. When Selenara visited again, older now, more confident, accompanied by a mother who had indeed begun reforming the sovereignty's brutal traditions, Sarah returned it with ceremony. Selenara accepted it with the gravity it deserved, then immediately handed it to a younger cousin who had come with the delegation. Pass it on, she said in perfect English, having studied human languages with typical Volan intensity. That's what kindness is for. The cousin was small and uncertain, marked with fresh scars from her own conditioning, and when Selenara knelt to hand her the toy, Sarah saw Nalith in the background, watching with eyes that held pride and sorrow in equal measure. Change was slow. Change was painful, but change was possible. That was the story humanity brought to the stars. Not superior weapons or faster ships or more efficient economies, but the stubborn insistence that things could be better, that suffering wasn't inevitable, that even ancient ways could bend toward kindness. It was a story written in scars that healed, in tears that cleansed, in small hands reaching across impossible distances to touch and be touched, and sometimes on quiet nights when the strange stars wheeled overhead, Sarah would stand at the observation post where she'd first heard that alarm and think about all the ways first contact could have gone. All the ways it should have gone, according to protocol and training, and the accumulated wisdom of cautious bureaucrats. She was profoundly glad she'd ignored all of that and simply done what her conscience demanded, reached out with kindness when harshness was expected, chose compassion over protocol, saw past the alien exterior to the frightened child within. That, she thought, was what humanity really meant. Not conquering or dominating or proving superiority, just the quiet courage to be kind in a universe that didn't always reward it, and the stubborn hope that kindness might be contagious enough to change the galaxy one heart at a time.